And we continue at 1:05 in the afternoon on the Jon Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, there's a lot of news today about who's running for things and who's not running for things. Remember San Francisco Mayor London Breed?
Wow, this is really nice.
She just announced that she is not running for Nancy Pelosi's seat in Congress. And in fact, she is endorsing Scott Wiener.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And gay guys do know how to have fun, so we'll be okay.
I'll tell you, that's kind of surprising to me. I assumed that this was going to be a free-for-all for all of the politicians in San Francisco who got caught in a logjam. But it looks like Scott Wiener has wrapped this thing up before it even started.
Yeah, there was talk of Matt Haney running. Of course, he has his own problems with his fundraising parties. But at this point, Scott Wiener is the most prominent person running for that seat.
Quite frankly.
And that guy is poison. We'll get to that another day. All right. Joining us right now is the publisher of the Flash Report website, which you can get online at flashreport.org. And you can follow him on X at Flash Report. Jon Fleischman, welcome.
I'm going to need about 10 minutes and then I can chat. Would that be all right? Hello, John, you there?
I'm here.
How are you doing, sir? All I know is I listen on the radio and you're talking about Scott Wiener and it made me want to hang up. That guy,
okay, tell me if I'm wrong here. Let's start out with that. I think he will be worse than Nancy Pelosi, and I don't think it's going to be close.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality, and this will be very hard to talk about because, Nancy Pelosi is as liberal as they come, and we have all these reasons to dislike her. But the reason why she's still better than Wiener is because she's caught up in the kind of the establishment, right? She's busy making money and making things happen, and Wiener is more of the AOC mold, maybe even worse. It's like a AOC but into kids, right? It's he comes from this kind of alternative background universe in San Francisco that is very non-aligned with, I don't know, you just call traditional American values. I don't know how best to say it. And so this is a guy who's comfortable, attending these parades in town where people aren't wearing clothes or they're only wearing leather and very comfortable with the idea that government should be making decisions for people's children instead of their parents and all those things that are horrible and yucky. And he will be a progressive cause warrior. And I don't know that Pelosi in her later years really, was that much of a cause warrior.
Well, I've got to say this. Out of all the boutique issues that Scott Wiener has taken up, the one that offends me the most is what he wants to do with zoning and housing, which is essentially eliminate it. And I understand the libertarian impulse of, okay, you own the property, you can do what you want with it, and the government shouldn't be able to tell you.
That's not what we have going on here, though.
No. And let me tell you, as someone who just came back from Brazil, where there is essentially no zoning, it turns into a nightmare where you have a single-family home next to a 6-story apartment building, next to an auto body shop, next to a church, next to the county health clinic, next to a bodega, next to a bakery. There's no parking anywhere. The electricity is constantly going out. The water is constantly going out. The sewage system is not built for something like that. You can't really decide, okay, I'm going to go to the shopping district now. Okay, now I'm going to go to where the restaurants are. Okay, now I'm going to go to where all the administrative buildings are. Everything is just mixed together. And that is what he wants in California. And the last thing we need is more chaos.
Yeah, well, and the way that they do this is what they do is they say, you know what, we've had all these problems with the government allowing you to build things on your property, so we're going to green light building, but only what we want. So, for example, if you have a single-family home you want to build, that's not on their approved list. You don't get to do that. But if you're willing to build a 6-story tall, multi-family unit, and provide subsidized housing, well, then we'll green light that, but you do have to pay prevailing wage when you do it, right?
Yeah, I don't understand where they're coming from. I know he's from the East Coast originally, and in Philadelphia and New York, people live like that. They live in those high-density neighborhoods where everyone's living on top of everyone else. That's not why people move here. People move here because they enjoy single-family homes. They like having a yard. They like having a car. They like having a pool and some grass and some trees.
Well, it's called the American dream, and you want to have the American dream, and instead they have this dystopian view of how they think you want to live. Like, believe it or not, nobody wants California to become one huge Castro district of San Francisco. That's not anybody's dream except maybe Wiener's dream.
Well, I don't want to live above a Panda Express. And that's what he wants. He wants all this mixed-use building, and that's not what attracts people to this state. Now, maybe there are places where people enjoy living like that. This is not one of them. Yet he seems hell-bent on making the entire state look like that.
Yes. And so the bottom line is that things can get worse. This guy out of San Francisco is the worst. He's been serving as the budget committee in the California State Senate, where he is basically arm twisted. Not every Democrat is as liberal as he is, but, even I've had conversations with a few of, they're scarce, but there are some moderate Democrats, and they all say the same thing. If you don't vote for his crazy bills, then he doesn't put your stuff in the budget. And so, he leverages that. And, maybe the only good news about him running for Congress is he probably won't be chairing the budget committee anymore. But
that's true. Although with term limits, he was going to be leaving anyway. So I'd rather see him out of office than in Congress.
But don't worry. We have Tom Steyer coming into the picture now to save us in California. So that's the new.
Well, let's get into that, because he has an ad out that makes him sound like Super Dave Osborne, where he is putting himself out there as a candidate for governor in California. There are already a bunch of candidates, a bunch of Democratic candidates in particular, who are often running for that office. But Tom Steyer now thinks that there's space in the race for him. What do you make of that decision?
I can't do this myself, Dad. I think it's. Well, are you asking me a rhetorical question?
I think I'm asking you questions along with somebody else.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, I'm hanging out with my dad at the same time, so I apologize.
That's okay.
But go ask again. Sorry about that. It's totally my bad. I'm making.
Tom Steyer thinks that there's room in the race for him, and he thinks that Democrats like him and not just his money. I think Democrats like his money and they hate him.
Well, I think that's entirely the case. And everybody should know, this is a guy who spent 25 years of his life, Farallon Capital, using his money to buy big oil companies, big gas companies. He was, if you wanted to open up the textbook to somebody who was dumping carbon emissions into the planet Earth, this was the guy. And then after he amassed $2 billion, then he decides, well, I want to run for office in a blue state. So I'm going to reinvent myself and basically use all the money that I made in that, and now I'm going to become some sort of Greta clone lefty, and it doesn't have much credibility. So
wasn't he super close to Kevin De Leon when Kevin De Leon was the president pro tem of the Senate, and didn't he fund Kevin De Leon's endeavors? Yes, he did, absolutely. So. And the reality is, I don't know if it's good news or bad news, that there's nobody running for governor in California on the Democrat side of the aisle who's above a B player. It's actually kind of odd, because I don't like Gavin Newsom. You don't like Gavin Newsom. He's a bad governor for California, but at least I feel like he's punching it at his grade level. He's not doing a good job, but you kind of look at him and you say, okay, that's a type A person, right? We don't like what he's doing. Everyone else that's running really is so lackluster that you can every day forget who they are, because there's just a whole bunch of them and none of them stick out, and Steyer is going to fit right in with that bunch. So, Well, let's talk about
So-
another one who's expected to jump in, maybe even tomorrow night on Jimmy Kimmel, and that is East Bay Congressman Eric Swalwell, whose claim to
he's
fame
terrible.
is being a bomb thrower on cable news, who now wants to be governor of California.
Swalwell is absolutely. I mean, I was making a cartoon about him for my website this morning, and I had to make his head extra large because if anybody's met Eric Swalwell, he's the smartest guy I know. But this is a guy who's had a past relationship with a Chinese spy. You talked more about that than anybody that I know, right? This is a guy who, he's like a caricature, right? Everything about him is is pure ambition. He's a former prosecutor from the East Bay area, and I think he's running because he's looked at the field and say, hey, there's no active members of Congress running. I may as well throw my hat in the ring. And like I said, he just fits in with all the rest of them because there's literally nothing whatsoever remarkable about Eric Swalwell unless you ask him.
I get the impression that for him, the fame is what he's out for. That if he wasn't in politics, he would be one of these people trying to get on a reality TV program. That he just wants to be on TV that bad. That is the desire that motivates him. And that's dangerous.
Yeah, well, of course it is. Well, and ambition is feeding so many of these people that are running. And I was thinking about it, and I think one of the reasons why there's just literally no good candidates running on the Democrat side of the aisle is twofold. One is the unions just own everything, and so they have cultivated a whole crop of zombies that only do what they're being told to do, right? And then on top of that, if you want to look at the reason why there's no good candidates running, who in the heck wants to inherit the mess that Gavin Newsom has created? So any normal person would say, okay, that's a big train wreck waiting to happen, and who wants to inherit that mess? So, I mean, look, even Harris didn't want the mess. I mean, it's really, really bad if you've screwed up the state so bad that Kamala Harris doesn't want the job.
Of all the elected Democrats in the state of California, the one with the most impressive record, to my eye, and maybe you disagree, I don't know, is Matt Mahan, the mayor of San Jose. He is a guy who is running a big city. He is certainly going after homelessness. He's going after crime. He's going after regulation. He's doing all of the things that you would want a big city mayor to do. He's achieved some degree of success doing it. And when he hits a wall, when he hits a barrier, he just keeps going. I mean, he's one of these guys that is clearly trying to make that city work. In any normal world, he's the type of person that they would turn to and say, okay, you deserve a promotion. How about giving you a chance to be governor of California? But I can't imagine him being a viable candidate in that race because that party is just in a different place right now than where he is.
This is why you're a smart guy on the radio. You make a lot of common sense here. I can't imagine either. It's, at some level, John, I just look at the situation and I feel like we're the embarrassment of the United States of America. So it's a very difficult situation for us all to have to humble ourselves. So, anyways,
yeah, and
John,
it's sad.
I unfortunately have to sign off. I got a personal issue on this end of things, but keep up the good work. All right.
All right. Thank you for your time, Jon Fleischman, publisher of the Flash Report. You can read him online at FlashReport.org and follow him on X at Flash Report.
That was a unique interview.
I got the impression that there was someone standing next to him asking him questions the whole time he was on.
Well, and you don't know what was going on behind the scenes. So I had to keep ducking him every time you were asking a question because I think he thought he was hitting the mute button on his phone and he wasn't. So he was talking through the entire time to somebody else.
Well, that's a new one.
That's the strangest interview that's been on this show since that Larry Elder interview.
Oh, what are you going to do? Well, I'll tell you, Swalwell is going to end up on Jimmy Kimmel. And, it was Arnold who announced on Jay Leno, I wonder if he thinks that he's a star at the level of Arnold Schwarzenegger and that going on one of the late night shows is going to be something that generates national attention the way that it did for Arnold.
Well, you have to be a certain kind of delusional first to think that you should run the state of California, but there's a whole nother level of delusion if you think you're on the level of fame as who was the largest movie star in the world at the time in 2003.
And that was also back when those late night shows did huge numbers, and Jay Leno was the number one late night show in the nation. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, as you mentioned, was probably one of the top drawing actors in the globe, on the globe. And that was just a symbiotic sort of thing that happened organically. We had Dave Berg on the program not long ago. We have him on all the time, who was the one who booked Arnold Schwarzenegger for that interview. And he has talked about that on the show, saying that at the time that Arnold was booked, Arnold didn't know he was going to announce on the show. It just happened kind of organically. Typically, you tell the show if you're going to do something like that so they can prepare for it. And the staff at the Tonight Show, they weren't prepared for it because they didn't know it was coming.
He was just booked for Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines.
And for so many of those interviews, they're so tightly scripted, you know everything that's going to happen before it happens. And in that particular instance, the opposite occurred. And I think that Eric Swalwell is trying to look for a little of that magic when he makes his big announcement.
Stop
I also
whining.
don't think it's not a good idea to copy what someone else has already done. Just go out and do your own thing. You know, if he's looking to copy people, maybe he could find some part of the globe where it's snowing and make his announcement there and copy Amy Klobuchar. Remember that snow globe announcement?
Amy for America.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. Let's go to Tom in San Jose. Tom, hello.
Hey, John, thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to, I don't know, like you need any help. I wanted to help you out with that comment that you made about Matt Mahan. He's been terrible. Crime has gone up. Our street just got hit 2 weeks in a row, trying to steal the cars. They're stealing anything that's not nailed down. They're just brazen. They're looking right at the cameras like, what are you going to do? They send CSOs out to come and take reports. You never hear back from them again, just so they can say that they made a report. It's been the homeless out of control. I literally call his office and I say, Mayor Mahan, you made all these promises. We got homeless that are in many encampments that I drive by on a daily basis, and they stay there for months on end. And I call him. I said, these people are literally blocking the road. They're working on their vehicles. They got like a mechanic out there working, they are the mechanic, of course, working on these vehicles, and their legs are sticking across the road where we got to stop, let the other oncoming traffic go by, and then we got to go around their legs. And all their garbage, they get free garbage pickup, by the way, that we pay for. They go out there and they pick up all the garbage that they just throw all over the street and all over, the property that's nearest, closest to them. It's ridiculous. And I call his office and I ask him to do something about it, and they don't do nothing. They don't return phone calls, nothing. So I just wanted to add that in there. I know it's tough because you're not here, so I wanted to kind of be your.
Well, I don't doubt anything you just said. I will say this, though. When all of the other politicians in California lined up behind Gavin Newsom against Prop 36, Mahan was one of the only ones who was out there very publicly supporting Prop 36. And after Prop 36 passed, he has been going after the governor for not fully funding it, because part of the issue is if you're the city and you're picking people up who are breaking the law or they're living in a place they're not supposed to be living and you expect them to be prosecuted and go to jail, if you can't keep them in jail, it just becomes a revolving door. And I know that he was very, very, very involved in that campaign for Prop 36. And that's a good thing in California. It hasn't solved all of our problems, but it's a good first step. Thank you for the call, sir. All right. We told you yesterday that the state of California and the city of Los Angeles were at odds with one another when the city was trying to put out the fire in the Pacific Palisades. And today, Randy, we have an update.
The state definitely knew about the Lockman fire, and the state had parks officials supervising the firefighters trying to put out that fire from the get-go.
That's not a good look for Gavin.
For more, here's another report from News Nation.
Tonight, we have new exclusive details on the investigation into the handling of the deadly Palisades fire in California. News Nation investigative correspondent Rich McHugh obtained documents that may show that the state is, in fact, solely responsible for that fire and possibly for the deaths of the 12 people who died. Last week, our exclusive reporting found that a state representative was present near the burn scar, which had all the embers deep underground of a fire that had not been completely turned out. Well, it eventually turned into the Palisades fire.
It's going to be one of the biggest scandals of all time if the lawyers that are suing on behalf of those families can prove that the reason this fire got so out of control was because the state parks people, who Gavin is in charge of, said you can't bulldoze any trees, even the ones that are on fire.
What's interesting is that under normal circumstances, particularly if they were of different parties, you would have the mayor and the governor going to war with one another over this because it was a fight over jurisdiction. But because Bass and Newsom are of the same political party and they are political allies, I don't think they're going to turn on one another. What I think you're going to see from both of them, now that we know that their screw up allowed this to happen, they're both going to blame global warming.
Well, that's what Gavin did in Brazil.
And apparently, according to our reporting, a state representative was on the scene ordering firefighters around, telling them where they could and could not go.
That's not good.
No, it's not.
If you're wondering why, the fire department would leave the scene of a fire that was still not all the way out, could have been that they were told to.
Idiots.
Well, tonight, we not only have confirmation that a state representative was there, but we now know exactly when they arrived and why. News Nation's Rich McHugh joins us now with this exclusive. Rich, tell us what more you've managed to uncover.
Hi, Elizabeth. Well, it's really shocking, and ultimately comes down to two really big questions. Number one, did state mismanagement ultimately cause the Palisades fire? And did they lie about it in court, lie about all of it in court? And these new documents...
Boy, the defense attorney for the guy that started the Lockman fire, he's got to be eating all of this up.
Well, and it just goes to show you how out to lunch our politics are here in California. Newsom is running around the globe saying it was global warming, yet in court his people are lying about it, and the truth is going to come out as to just exactly how this fire started, and it's like they're in two separate worlds that aren't even connected to one another.
And these new documents that we've obtained suggest that that's absolutely what happened. Now, this all began in the early morning hours of January 1 when an alleged arsonist started the Lockman fire. And we know underground embers reignited 6 days later, starting a second, more devastating fire. That was the Palisades fire.
And we know through whistleblowers that LAFD has equipment that can detect those kinds of things that are happening underground. Is it possible that the reason the LAFD did not deploy that technology was the state wouldn't let them?
You know, as bad as it looked for the city of Los Angeles, the more we learn about this, the more the city tried to do the right thing, and they were stopped. They were prevented from doing it by either the political establishment in the city, the state of California, or a combination of them both.
In response to a lawsuit from over 3,000 Palisades residents alleging the state failed to monitor embers from that initial fire, Governor Newsom's office told News Nation, the state didn't start this fire. That was an arsonist.
What are you, Billy Joel?
The state didn't start this fire. That was an arsonist. And the state wasn't responsible for responding.
It was always burning since the world's been turning, huh?
Boy, I feel like I'm listening to K-Earth.
And the state wasn't responsible for responding to or monitoring this fire. Now, in new court filings, the state goes further and says the Palisades victims cannot allege that the state had notice of the Lockman fire because it never had notice. State records show a call at 12:27 a.m. on January 1, but with the rest of the incident report redacted, completely blacked out, basically.
What's that about?
Yeah, if you're supposed to be so transparent, why can't you tell us what's in that report?
Including their response to that call. But a Los Angeles Fire Department record tells us all the details.
Theirs wasn't redacted.
Uh-oh.
I'm really glad that the fire department is trying to do what they can, because I'm sure their name has been dragged through the mud. But I don't think anybody out there blames the on-the-line firefighters for what happened that day.
No, but to the layman, they're the ones that didn't put it out. And it couldn't be further from the truth, because they were telling the powers that be that the fire wasn't fully extinguished and they were ignored.
Shangy, you're a soothsayer, my girl.
The bureaucracy is real.
And the LAFD's records show not only did the LAFD notify the state just after midnight, the state sent a park representative at 1:46 in the morning on January 1. And that state park representative arrived on scene at 4 a.m. on January 1.
So the state was well aware of what was going on their land in the Palisades almost immediately, 4 hours after this thing started.
Which is in conflict with what they've said on the record.
Now, that Los Angeles Fire Department incident report shows what the state will not, that the Los Angeles Fire Department contacted the state after midnight on January 1, and a state park rep arrived on scene by 4 a.m.
If the state had no response.
You imagine that? The fire department calls, hey, there's a fire. Don't worry. We got our guys on it. No. We got to send someone out there. You guys are going to screw up our park.
It just goes to show you how when you have an absentee landlord like Gavin Newsom in charge, all of these people have decided that they're the king of their own faction and no one can tell them what to do. And if no one's watching you from the top, you get away with it.
If the state had no responsibility for this land, why are they sending a state park rep? The state is playing hide the ball. They're not being transparent with the public. Tell us that you sent a state park rep. Tell us what that state park rep did. Tell us on the next day, January 2, that you sent another state park rep who directed firefighters and said they couldn't bulldoze.
That's the guy who came out with the map.
I have a feeling all of this is going to come out in court.
All of these specific questions, Elizabeth, we have asked to Governor Newsom's office and the California State Parks, and they've declined to answer all of them. Back to you.
All right. We will continue reporting. Rich McHugh, thanks so much.
That's the latest on the state's involvement that they deny in the fire that eventually became the Palisades fire.
It's an enraging story that just gets worse and worse and worse the more you know. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Randy, what do you say we take a call?
Let's start with Albert in Lake County. Albert, hello.
Yes, hi, Randy. Hi, John. I called a long time ago when you guys first came out with this L.A. fire, and I said, hey, that was a rekindle, because I've been on them, ex-fireman, 35 years. And the first one I was on was the Oakland fire. In those days, when the fire went down in Oakland, they put it out, right? But they were fighting between the state and Fed over there. But I attributed a lot of that to DEI and affirmative action. Long story. But this, so the fires I've been on in Marin County, we put the fire out, and we had open space, we had state, we had parks, and so we could never bring in the heavy equipment without getting their permission because the state of California is messed up. So basically we put the fire out, and then we have to get permission before we can bring in the bulldozers.
Well, you called it when you said that you didn't think that this fire was put out properly, and that's what caused the Pacific Palisades to burn down. And now we're looking at a lot of finger pointing going on between agencies.
They always finger point, and they just hope we always forget about it, right?
All right. Well, thank you for the call, sir. I appreciate it. All right. So Prop 50, which I write about in my column this week, it's supposed to come out later on in the Southern California News Group, was allegedly put on the ballot in response to the state of Texas redrawing their maps. Gavin Newsom initially cut a deal with the state's congressional delegation, the Democratic delegation, saying, all right, we're going to threaten to do this. We're not actually going to do it, but we're going to threaten to do this, try to get them to back off. Well, he went on all the podcasts and engaged in bar talk, and then they were all in. Prop 50 passes. Well, we now have an update on what's going on in the state of Texas.
Well, a federal judge panel, 2 out of 3 judges, looked at those Texas maps and said, nope, those are illegal. So now that's going to the Supreme Court, which means it's possible that Texas could go back to their original maps. And even though California's Prop 50 was the Texas Response Act, they took that part out of the legislation. So California is going to get their 5 seats regardless.
Well, who knows? I know there are court challenges to Prop 50. And if the Texas map is thrown out, I would imagine it makes it easier for judges to throw California's new map out, too.
Wouldn't that be great? We throw all this nonsense out. For more, here's ABC 10 in Sacramento.
The future of redistricting could be unknown. Federal judges today blocked Texas from using its newly redrawn congressional maps in the 2026 midterm elections. The decision is expected to be appealed, but I want to go ahead and bring in ABC 10's Becca Habegger, who is joining us live in studio, to explain what this could mean for California, if anything.
Yeah, Alex, all this comes as the U.S. Justice Department is suing California over Prop 50. Now, both Texas and California have redrawn their congressional districts. Texas hopes to flip 5 seats Republican. California aims to flip 5 seats for Democrats. While both states face lawsuits, there are differences. And to help explain that, I want to start at the end of my conversation with this legal expert. Is there anything else?
I love when they start with the story, hey, just so you know, this is going to be confusing.
Is there anything else that's important to mention that I should keep in mind as I'm telling this story?
First of all, I really do not envy you having to try to tell this story in a way that is succinct.
Mary Beth Moylan, a professor at University of the Pacific's McGeorge School of Law, compares the legal challenges to Texas's and California's redrawn maps like this.
This is really complicated.
Which is why when you bring up gerrymandering outside of this context to the average person, nobody knows what it is. It's like when Katie Porter ran for U.S. Senate on the subject of earmarks. If you're a political junkie, you know what it is. If you're a normal person, you probably don't.
Little D. Hey, I'm going to do my best.
Okay, good luck.
On Tuesday morning, 2 federal district court judges on a 3-judge panel issued a decision following a multiple-day hearing, blocking Texas from using its newly redrawn maps in the midterms, something called a preliminary injunction.
It will absolutely get appealed to the Supreme Court.
I'm going to need an assist on that.
Shang.
Something called a preliminary injunction.
It will absolutely get appealed to the Supreme Court.
Thanks, Shangy.
Shang will not be appearing in the Supreme Court, just in case any of you are wondering.
That's right. I like that. That was amazing.
It's important to note here, courts are not allowed to overturn any redistricting or gerrymandering done for political reasons.
The only way to challenge a redistricting scenario is if it violates the Constitution in terms of racial gerrymandering.
In the Texas hearing, she says evidence showed first, President Donald Trump asked Governor Greg Abbott to find him 5 more Republican seats, but Abbott and the legislature did not act.
They did not take the president up on that request until the Department of Justice sent a letter that said, we have reviewed your 2021 maps. We believe they violate federal law because they are an unconstitutional racial gerrymander.
So because the redistricting might have been based on redrawing along racial lines, and because Texas has a long history with Voting Rights Act violations, Moylan says, the district court judges paused the use of the new maps pending further adjudication.
Okay, now I'm confused.
Okay, here's what's wild. The courts are really the ones who started all this. Go back to New York. People forget about this. New York was the first state to redraw their lines after the census. And the court stepped in and said, you need to redraw your lines for whatever reason. And they redrew them, and the Democrats picked up 3 seats. And that's when Trump went to Texas and said, redraw your lines. And then a judge came to Texas and said, you have to redraw your lines.
And now a new judge is saying, no, those lines don't work.
When the hell did we get to a point to where low-level judges call all the shots?
The U.S. Supreme Court could uphold that pause or let the maps move forward. As for California,
the legal challenge to Proposition 50 is also a challenge based on racial gerrymandering.
One big difference, she says, is that because California's redistricting was done through a statewide vote of the people, whereas Texas's maps were redrawn only by state lawmakers, it's harder to prove that voters' intent was racial gerrymandering.
And in fact, if you ask the average voter in California what they think about this, they would say,
no, I don't know enough to give you any good information, but good luck finding someone who does.
That's our man on the street for you.
I told you that one would come in handy.
The real focus in California was on the political.
And again, courts are not allowed to overturn partisan gerrymandering, only racial gerrymandering.
I hate the cliche, but time will tell. I mean, we just have to wait to see how this plays out at the Supreme Court.
Well, since California initiated the whole Prop 50 process in direct response to what Texas was doing.
It's called the Election Rigging Response Act, but they took away the provision when they passed the bill in the legislature that went on the ballot that said, we only do this if Texas does theirs.
Oops.
People have been asking today whether today's ruling in Texas threatens Prop 50. Well, the map's creator, Paul Mitchell, said today on X, no, this doesn't undo Prop 50. That Traeger language was removed in the legislative process as it was clear that Texas was redistricting. So even if their map is invalidated or postponed, the Prop 50 maps stay in place, he says. We'll continue following this. Alex?
All right, Becca, thank you for breaking all of that down.
So there's the latest on Texas possibly not being able to use their new maps, and California for now can.
Here's what I don't understand. The law professor said the courts can only strike it down if it has to do with race, correct?
That's what they said, because that would violate the Constitution and the Voting Rights Act.
Okay, so the Constitution says that all the districts have to have equal population as well. But if they're using data that is old, and then you had COVID that shook the snow globe, and we know that our population is way down, and they took a seat out of LA County because of a population decrease or decline, and then they put one back in, how are these districts equal in population?
That's a good point.
We've got one more hour coming up on the Jon Phillips Show.